Now, this is a story that you're not going to hear anywhere else except for here, because the media doesn't want to tell you the truth about the good guy with the gun. But I'm here to tell you, over 60% of active shooters are stopped by good guys with guns. All right, so this story has been breaking for the past couple of days, but the problem is that the left-wing media is not reporting this story at all. So I'm going to report it because I think it's interesting that when the story doesn't fit the narrative, then all of a sudden they don't promote the story. But what we've all been told is that good guys with guns don't stop active shooters. It's very rare. And that is what has been promoted by the FBI and a lot of the media, right? Because essentially what they want to do is essentially take away the Second Amendment and say no one should have a gun. But now what we've been finding is that the FBI data on active shooters is extremely misleading. And instead of the 4% or 5% they say of active shooters that are stopped by good guys with guns, the true number is about 60%. Here's the article. A large percentage of active shooter incidents are thwarted by armed citizens who sometimes don't even fire their weapon. But those cases are no longer counted under President Joe Biden's pro-gun control policies. You know what I call this? I call this just hiding facts to push a narrative. Because remember, they don't want anybody to have a gun. According to just released data from the Crime Prevention Research Center, 41% of active shooting incidents were stopped by armed civilians. Now, outside of the so-called gun-free zones, which bar the legal carrying of firearms, over 63%, so it rose from 41% to 63% of active shooting cases were ended by an armed civilian, according to the center. New data from John R. Lott, the former Justice Department Senior Advisor for Research and Statistics, are his latest to challenge undercounting and bias in government reports on shootings and back up efforts by Second Amendment and police groups to encourage people to carry firearms. So if more people knew that more than half of active shooter incidents, 63% outside of gun-free zones were stopped by people, good guys with guns, more people would carry guns because they'd be like, okay, well, this is probably going to be the answer, right? I have to be my own officer. If someone comes in with an AR-15 and starts shooting, and takes the officers 5 minutes to get there, you know how much damage they can do in 5 minutes? But if someone goes into a place and has a gun, and they know, and everybody else in there has guns, then that changes the dynamics a lot. I think it changes a lot. Lott continually updates his data to include all cases. So this is somebody who is aggregating data along with the FBI, including those the government overlooks or misclassifies, to counter media reports that it is rare for civilians to put down active shooters. His information is especially critical since the Biden administration stopped counting defensive actions by civilians. So Biden administration just straight up said, we're not going to count them anymore. We're not going to count them. So this research facility is saying, okay, we're going to count them all. Following the Sandy Hook school shooting in 2012, Wayne Pierre, executive director for the National Rifle Association, NRA, famously held a press conference to decry the shooting and offer a solution. He said, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun, which is true. That's why police are the good guy with the gun, but sometimes it just takes them too long to get there. Liberal anti-gun groups and media allies mocked his comments, but they have been unable to come up with a winning solution to stopping often deranged shooters. Lott's data showed that LaPierre was likely correct. So, of the 440 cases that he cited from 2014 to 2022, 157 active shootings were stopped by armed civilians. By comparison, the FBI cited only 302 cases, so they cited about 138 less, and even fewer thwarted by civilians, 14. So this guy found that 157 were stopped by civilians, and the FBI is only reporting 14. That's crazy. The FBI data from 2014 to 2020 have led the media to call the interventions rare. Lott said the FBI data often misclassifies cases, does not dig deeper than simply skim police reports, or wrongly identify civilian with the gun as a security guard. So civilian who has a gun, they'll say it's a security guard, and then they will say that's not a good guy with a gun. That's just a security guard. Here's an example. Turning Point USA. A monster entered a Texas church to commit mass shooting. It took Jack Wilson 6 seconds to kill him. The average police response was 9 minutes. That's true. 9 minutes. Just imagine that's what's happened. Jack was armed and saved lives of his friends and family from absolute evil. This is Jack's story. So this is the guy, a good guy with a gun. But again, the FBI has not been reporting on this. Evidence compiled by the Crime Prevention Research Center shows that the sources of media relied on undercounted the number of instances in which armed citizens have thwarted such attacks by an order of more than 10. So wow. Yeah, that's true. If you got 150 versus 14, that's 10. That's 10x. That's 10 times, saving untold numbers of lives. Of course, law-abiding citizens stopping these attacks are not rare. What is rare is the national news coverage of those incidents. Latch New Report shared with Secrets on Friday said the FBI reports that armed citizens only stopped 14 of 302 active shooter incidents it identified for the period of 2014 through 2022. The FBI defines active shooters incidents as those in which an individual actively kills or attempts to kill people in a populated public area. But it does not include those it deems related to other criminal activity, such as robbery or fighting over drug turf, he added. Those types of shootings, however, have recently been included in cases of mass shootings by several media outlets. So, in other words, the media will classify them as active shooters or mass shootings, but the FBI wasn't. In his updated report, he also made the argument our analysis by the CPRC identified a total of 440 active shooter incidents during that time period and found that an armed civilian stopped 157. Wow. The previous report looked at only instances when armed civilians stopped what likely would have been a mass shooting. There were another 27 that we didn't include where the armed civilians stopped armed attackers, but the suspects did not fire his gun. Those cases are excluded from our calculations, though it could be argued that a civilian who stopped what likely could have been an active shooting event. The FBI reported that armed civilians thwarted 4.6 active shooter incidents, while the CPRC found 35.7. Wow. Two factors explain the discrepancy. One, misclassified shootings, and two, overlooked incidents. Regarding the former, the CPRC determined that the FBI reports had misclassified 5 shootings. In 2 incidents, the Bureau notes in its detailed write-ups that civilians possess valid firearm permits, confronted the shooters, and caused them to flee the scene. So that should be counted. However, the FBI did not list these cases as being stopped by armed civilians because police later apprehended the attacker. That doesn't make any sense. If the armed civilian stops and the guy flees, that's the armed civilian that stopped. But it shows you how they're massaging the numbers to try to make it seem like it's not the good guy with the gun, it's something else. It's the police. Call the police, right? In 2 other incidents, the FBI misidentified armed civilians as armed security personnel. Finally, the FBI failed to mention citizen engagement in 1 incident. So they're just misclassifying them all the way. He added, for the second factor, overlooked cases, the FBI more significantly missed 35 incidents identified by the CPRC where what would likely have been a mass public shooting was thwarted by an armed civilian. There were another 103 active shooter incidents that they missed. Finally, he broke out shootings that occurred outside of gun-free zones, presumably those with concealed carry permits, enter without their weapon as required by law. Between 2014 and 2022, citizens stopped 104 out of 204 potential mass shootings where we could identify the guns were allowed in the area. So if they allow the guns in the area, it seems like you're stopping more than about half or more than half. So 51% of attacks were stopped by people legally carrying concealed handguns. Wow, that's a game changer. Again, the most recent data is most accurate. For 2022, 63.5% of attackers were stopped in areas where people were clearly allowed to carry. And that's it, right? Just imagine how much higher that would be if, places like New York and all these other places allowed you to carry guns. 63%. That's crazy. So if you're allowed to carry a gun, 63% of the time if somebody comes with a mass shooting, they're stopped by that person with the gun. That's crazy. The numbers indicate if we didn't have gun-free zones, we would have more people stopping these attacks, he said. That's crazy. So Let me know what you think about this story, because this story is not being covered by left-wing media. It's not being, the fact that the FBI numbers, their data, the FBI's data is misleading and wrong. It's shocking because most people take the FBI data for what it is, and it's just horribly wrong. It's funny because it reminded me of this shooting in a mall where essentially an untrained guy with a gun stopped the shooting. Check this out.
Short of heroic.
Greenwood Police Chief James Eisen praising a 22-year-old now being hailed a hero. Elisha Dicken was legally carrying a handgun Sunday when a 20-year-old shot 5 people at Greenwood Park Mall.
This young man, Greenwood's good Samaritan, acted within seconds, stopping the shooter and saving countless lives.
Investigators said today Dicken had no police training or military background.
I was very proficient in that, very tactically sound, and as he moved to close in on the suspect, he was also motioning for people to exit behind him.
And think about this, that happens 63% of the time if you're not in a gun-free zone. If you're in a gun-free zone, it happens 40% of it, 41 or 45% of the time. That's crazy. Let me know what you feel in the comment section. Let me know if you think this changes your mind about, people being able to carry guns and the solution to this problem now where you have these mass shooters. Don't get me wrong. The easy solution for this would be take away everybody's guns, right? That's not going to happen. We have a Second Amendment. And even if you take away everybody's guns, then you have Chicago. We have the people who do get the guns, because having a gun for a criminal that's the cost of doing business, right? You have to have the weapon. Right? That's why Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws in the nation, but they have the gun problem. And people will be like, well, why do they have a gun problem, right? They have the toughest, you can't carry a gun, you can't get a gun, you can't buy a gun. But why do they have a problem? Because the gun is not the problem. If you're a criminal, you need the gun to do it. So if you say, I'm gonna give you 100 years for carrying a gun, they're still gonna carry it because it's a cost of doing business for them. So the only people who follow gun laws are the people like you and me, the people who are law-abiding citizens who want to do it the right way. And that's why our founders put in a Second Amendment. So that right couldn't be taken away from us to defend yourself. Now, no matter how you come off on the gun debate, you have to admit that when the stats are looked at and people say, okay, how do you stop these crazies from doing what they're doing? It seems like 60% of the time it's having a good guy with a gun. Let me know how you feel in the comment section. You know what I always say? Tell me where I'm wrong, because I like my ideas to be challenged. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you next time. Peace.